three things we love about SBA loans and three things we hate about SBA loans. So let's get started with, oh, look at that fancy spinning heart there. Three things we love about SBA loans. Number one, highly leverageable, especially with new seller carry down payments. All right, so what does that mean? Highly leverageable means SBA loans allow you to buy a much bigger business than you would normally be able to if you were just using your own money, or even if you were using third-party money. Generally, third-party, well, let me back that up. So let's say you want to buy $1 million business. If you have no leverage or debt or loans, then you'd have to have $1 million to buy that business. If you use private money to buy that, generally you're going to need about 30% down, meaning you would need $300,000 to buy $1 million business for most private money loans. The SBA, you can put as little as 10% down, meaning for that $1 million deal, you can put down as little as 100,000. And that's what I mean by leverage. You can buy $1 million business for $100,000. Now, late last year, late 2023, the SBA made some changes in order to improve their product. And one of the things they did is they allow the sellers to seller finance your down payment, meaning in a perfect scenario, and I say that importantly, in a perfect scenario, you can buy a business for no money out of your pocket using an SBA loan by having the seller take care of your down payment as a seller finance. Now, the upside of that is you can get a loan for really nothing out of your pocket. The downside is the way that works standard is the seller has to cannot receive any funds from their seller financing portion for some period of time. Now, it used to be that the seller couldn't receive any money until the SBA was paid off. It's called a standby. So if the seller did a seller financing and gave you $100,000 and the SBA gave you $900,000, it used to be that if you had a 10-year SBA loan, the seller couldn't start receiving any money against that until the SBA was paid off for 10 years. They've now changed that so that the seller standby can be as low as 24 months, but it can be as high as even 5 years still. So somewhere between 2 and 5 years. So what does that mean? That means if you go to the seller and say, I'd like to buy your business, it's $1 million business, I would like you to carry the $100,000 down, but they cannot receive any money against that for somewhere between 2 and 5 years. Once that time limit hits, then they can start receiving money. So even though the seller can offer seller carry down payment, it's still a tough sell because a lot of sellers won't want to do that because they'll want to start receiving money against their note sooner. However, if they have a business that they really want to sell it and you're the right buyer and the deal structure is right, a lot of sellers will actually do that. When we're talking to sellers, and when we put a business on the market that's SBA eligible, we explain that to our sellers in advance and we let them know, hey, this is the type of offer that may come in. Be prepared to know that if the buyer asks for a seller carry, that you won't be able to receive some of that money for some period of time. And is that going to be okay? And most of the time they're fine with it because let's talk, what's the mathematics of that are, they sell their business for $1 million, they're getting 900,000. So they were getting a large chunk of the money up front. And then the 100,000 they carry on the back end, it's not that big of a deal. So that's something we love about it. And that's a new feature with that seller carry down payment that's really cool. So what's the next thing that we love about it? So the lender and underwriters provide a lot of due diligence and gut check services for you. So most SBA loans, how they work, they come from a lender. You're not actually borrowing money from the SBA. You're borrowing money from a lender. That could be a bank. It could be an SBA only lending institution, like a national lending institution, etc. And then that loan is guaranteed by the SBA to the bank. So most SBA loans to acquire a business, you're not actually borrowing money directly from the SBA. What that does is when you as a buyer go to get an SBA loan, you are going to have to qualify, and the business is going to have to qualify with the bank's parameters. And they're going to look at the financials, the tax returns. They're going to do a deep analysis to determine, do we believe that the risk of this loan makes sense, both from the seller and the buyer? And then once that process is done, the SBA looks at the business and their underwriters take another look at it. What's cool about that for buyers is that really it allows both the bank and the SBA to kind of do some of the due diligence for you. And they really go through things with a fine-tooth comb. And so a lot of times, obviously, when you're buying a business, we recommend, you consult a tax professional to look at the tax implications. You have an accountant or a CPA that goes through the finances as part of your due diligence. You have an attorney that goes through the legal aspects of it as part of your due diligence, et cetera. The nice thing about an SBA loan is a lot of the work your accountant would do and you'd be paying them for, the bank and the SBA will actually do a lot of that for you. So it's a really nice backstop to make sure, because they will not lend you money against a business that the debt doesn't work. So they won't let you get upside down with the cash flow because they're trying to protect themselves as well. So it's a really nice gut check. The third thing we love about SBA loans is that they have really long loan terms. So a lot of private money generally tends to be 5-year, 7-year, and even maybe 10-year debt. And so when you're amortizing a loan over those parameters, your monthly debt service can be pretty high. The SBA has up to 25 years, meaning if you're amortizing your loan over a much longer period of time, your actual monthly payments are much lower, and so your cash flow can cover that debt. And that's a really nice thing. You rarely will see a private lender, unless you're talking really, really large deals that are being backed by like some of the major institutions, but I'm talking, tens of millions of dollars. You generally won't see a 20 or 25-year loan term. On the smaller deals, you're generally going to see 5, 7, or maybe 10. And so the SBA gives you 25, which really makes the math work out really, really well from a standpoint of the monthly payments and being able to cover that monthly debt with cash flow. All right. So those are 3 things we love about SBA loans. Let's talk about 3 things we hate about SBA loans.
I have a question
Yes.
before you move on.
Jump in, Bill. Go
So
ahead.
what dictates the length of that loan? Is the 25 years always available, or is that
No,
conditional?
that's a great question. Up to. So the lender is going to look at that and determine, um, obviously, the longer the loan term, the higher the risk for the lender, right? Because it's they're looking at, is this business even going to exist 25 years from now, and that sort of thing. So different lenders have different terms. They're going to look at it from, they're going to kind of put it together, and they're going to try and match the cash flow with the debt service. So if the business is cash flowing, let's say $10,000 a month, they're going to try and make it so the payments are going to be, let's call it, $3,000 a month or $4,000 a month. So there's plenty of profit margin in there to keep the business healthy. So if the business on a 5-year note would be $9,000 a month, then they're going to look and say, okay, what does a 7-year look like? What does a 10-year look like? And they're going to try and match the term to match the debt service so that the cash flow remains healthy over the debt service. They're not going to give you more years than they have to, but they can stretch it out that far. Most of the time, you're going to see that on a business where there are assets. So I know a lot of, some of the businesses that some of you are looking for are more asset free. So they're digital businesses like agencies, e-commerce, things like that. The lenders that makes lenders nervous because there's nothing to like recoup if something goes south. So a business with a building attached to it, with real estate, with a physical presence, with assets like equipment or well, not inventory as much, but equipment. So if you had let's say you had a construction business with $1 million worth of equipment, tractors and bulldozers and dump trucks, etc. They're more likely to give you a longer loan term because they have some security in those hard assets. Whereas a business without any physical assets, they're going to keep a little shorter. Great question, though. Any other questions on the 3 things we love about SBA loans? All right, let's jump into 3 things we hate. So number one, they take forever. That should be like in capital letters and bold and everything, forever to close. So the average closing length of time right now is running about 75 days. And that's 75 days from the time they actually get all of the information they've asked for. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Getting them the information they asked for can take weeks sometimes. So if you are acquiring with an SBA loan, you need to factor at least 90 days from the time your offer is accepted to closing, and it could be even longer. That will scare off some buyers. If you're a buyer and that will scare off some sellers. If you're a buyer and you are competing against a cash buyer who can close in 30 days and pay cash, it's going to be pretty tough to convince a seller to take your deal where you've got to, go through hoops and it might take 90 days. So that's a big downside. It's a downside because it's a lot of time and energy and stress, and it's a downside because if you're competing against somebody with more cash who's not using SBA, then your offer may look less attractive than others. So sometimes you have to sweeten the pot in order to compensate for that. But like I said, plan on a minimum of 75, closer to 90, and it's not uncommon to go more than 90 days from offer acceptance to close with an SBA loan. The next thing we hate is you'll need to provide more documentation than a top secret Pentagon clearance. It is insane. If you've ever bought a house and gotten a mortgage, you feel like the mortgage company knows what color underwear you had on yesterday, and they know what you had for breakfast this morning. The SBA is even more detailed. You better have your ducks in a row with regard to your taxes, with regard to your income, with regard to everything. They really ask for a lot of documentation, and it's pretty aggressive. And we've had some buyers who have bristled at just kind of the level of information, and sometimes they'll ask for the same thing multiple times. Keep in mind, again, it's two layers. It's the lender doing their process, and then it's the SBA underwriters doing their process after the lender has approved their side. So you can provide everything that they've asked for weeks, and then you get everything and they say, okay, the lender's approved it. Now we just have to submit to the SBA. And guess what? Here comes 15 more requests for documentation, information, clarification. It can be frustrating. Last thing that we hate about SBA loans is that you can only use it to acquire U.S. businesses. Now, for us at Westbound Road, that can be a struggle because about 60% of our business is international. We do a lot of work with businesses out of the UK, the EU, Australia, Mexico, etc. And an SBA loan can only be used to acquire a business that already exists in the United States. So depending on what you're looking for, if you're looking at physical location businesses here in the US, it's great for you. If you're looking at some of the digital types of businesses that people like, SaaS, e-commerce, etc., a lot of times those businesses aren't headquartered in the United States. Even if the operations and the customers are in the United States, sometimes they're headquartered offshore, and that puts the SBA out of contention for being used for that. So we've had some really great businesses that would have made perfect SBA acquisitions, but because of where they're located, can't use them. So those are the three things we love about SBA loans and the three things we hate about SBA loans. The list goes longer on both sides, but those are the top three that we came up with.